My name is Gung Wang. It's pronounced like Gung Ho, if that's easier to remember. And I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Civic Champs. And these are some of the logos that I'm associated with. But the main thing is, I really enjoy innovation and startups. And so I've had a couple other ones in the past, but have loved being in the nonprofit space. And you all actually truly make that much more fun than car dealerships or other places. But with that, let me introduce Allison, our guest. She's the president of every.org. And Allison, yeah, would you care to share a little bit about yourself, your bio, and sort of your experience at every.org?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Gung. This is a pleasure. I have spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector, and I was an early pioneer in the use of digital tech for social good. I've written 4 books on that topic. The books on the right-hand side are the 2 I've written with Beth Cantor, the network nonprofit, about the ways that digital technology can help us to flatten organizations and lead people and organizations in larger networks. And then more recently, the Smart Nonprofit that came out about 2 years ago about the use of AI for social good, which is what we're going to talk about today. I joined every.org about 18 months ago. We're a nonprofit, a national nonprofit. And if you click ahead, I'm going to tell you a little bit about every.org. Whoops.
Nope. Nope. Yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned, every.org is a 501c3. We're organized like a DAF, Gung, meaning people can donate to us any kind of asset or through any kind of payment method, Venmo, cards, crypto, stock. And we then move those dollars and donations directly to the 1.2 million nonprofits in the IRS database. But what this does is we're taking all the friction out of online giving. We don't charge any setup fees. We only charge credit card fees. We don't sell any data to third parties. And a nonprofit of any size, Gung, can receive crypto and stock or DAF donations, which can be very hard for smaller organizations to receive.
Yeah.
And we're just moving the money. That's the whole reason why we're in business. And on the right-hand side, you can see we're funded by foundations like Gates. And Garrett Camp he's the co-founder of Uber, and he's the chair of our board, which helps a lot. And Fidelity, Catalyst Fund are contributors. And we're funded by tips, optional tips from donors. And that's it. We're just trying to make this really simple, joyful for donors, easy for nonprofits. And if you want to click one more time, you can see that every nonprofit can receive all of these different payment methods. It's really amazing. I get so excited about this because it's just making it so easy. And we are the only nonprofit in this space, right? There are lots of other online donation and payment methods, but they're commercial entities and they have different, interests than we do. So particularly for smaller organizations, our system here, I strongly encourage anybody on the call to take a look at what we're doing here.
Yeah, that's so unique, right? Like you said, there's lots of for-profit peers like, of ours that do donations. But yeah, you really don't see a nonprofit serving nonprofits.
That's just it. And we're not extracting anything. We're not extracting data. We're not extracting fees. We're really here to serve our fellow nonprofits in the space. So it takes 5 minutes to set up your account on our site. And you could use our site and our donate button on your website and other things as well. International Rescue Committee uses us for crypto and stock and DAF payments, and they have other systems for credit cards and other things. So whatever works for people. We're not here to try to own everybody's donation system. We're here to just make it super easy.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And then in terms of today's topics,
yeah,
you're gonna, I think the structure today we discuss is, you're gonna share just a little bit of background information around sort of the 4 things listed here on AI, ethical responsible use policy, the leaky bucket problem, and then we're going to have more of a conversation. And so thank you to all the participants that had submitted questions in advance. And so we're going to pick from some of those, and Alice is going to kind of share her thoughts on those topics. So yeah, should we all go to the next slide?
We can dig right in. Now, I think it's really important that we level set around AI. It's been on everybody's mind for the last year and a half. And it means a lot of different things, Gung, right? It's not one thing. It is this suite of technologies that do have a common DNA, right? That this is computer code that is powered by algorithms, which are like recipes in cooking, in order to be able to predict, behavior, look for patterns, create content. If we're talking about generative AI, right? It's likely most of the folks here have heard about ChatGPT. It takes just Library of Congress size data sets because the algorithms have to practice looking for patterns over and over again. And contrary to what it may feel like out in the world, Gung, it's not better than humans yet, right?
Right.
We're still in charge, and that's part of what I want to talk about here. But AI is everywhere. It's not just generative AI. If you've gone on to a shopping site, you might be able to have instant chat with what looks like a person, but it's probably a chatbot, right? It's probably a computer generated question and answer system. You might use Siri or Alexa on your phones in your house. You might be using ChatGPT to draft communications. I was in the supermarket yesterday and saw a robot that is checking on whether shelves are stocked or not. And we're going to see a lot more robots coming online to provide company to seniors or to stock shelves in a food bank, which they started to do during COVID. And then there are the large language models. Those are the systems that have been in use at places like Netflix or Amazon, right? That says if you've watched or bought something, maybe you'd like something else. What's coming online in the next year or so, Gung, are going to be large language models to recommend through Fidelity DAF or Schwab DAF, right? So these technologies are coming very, very quickly. And I want to make two really quick comments that are super important for folks here to know. Number one, AI is going to be infused in every single part of an organization, right? The folks here today are involved in volunteer management. Any system you buy in the future for managing volunteers is going to have a part of it that's automated, right? That is looking for patterns of what people are volunteering for, that are making opportunities much faster and easier for people. But AI is also going to be in fundraising, in finance, in HR, in workflow. It's just going to be built into everything. And one of the parts that makes it super challenging, Gung, is unlike social media, our last chapter in tech development, you can't see it operate. My friend Beth Cantor calls it the refrigerator humming along in the background, right? It's working, but we don't see it making decisions for us. And that raises a really difficult ethical problem for organizations. And I'm going to talk about ethical use in a second. But Gung, imagine that you've bought a software package for HR, and it's going to screen resumes for jobs that you've created. And that sounds fantastic. You tell it what to look for, and you're going to get 800 resumes for a job that you're advertising for, and it's going to take it down to 30, your top 30. Most people would say, fantastic, I don't want to do that work. Here's the problem. Those algorithms have been programmed by a person, and it is likely that that person is both male and white. And when that code is being used to screen resumes, you only see who got in. You don't see who was left out. So that's why we as nonprofit folks have to be really educated about being able to ask good questions of these product creators. How did you test for bias? How did you code to mitigate bias? How do I use this without creating racial and gender bias in my organization? So that's one of the enormous challenges we're going to have coming up with AI.
No, that makes so much sense. Yeah. I mean, the bias, so hard
So
to
hard if you can't
overcome.
see it, right? You've got to proactively raise up this issue within your organization. And Gung, if you ask a commercial software developer about
Mm,
bias and they say to you, "Ugh, we can't tell you that. It's proprietary software, right? This is our secret sauce."
right,
My advice to you is move on. There are going to be lots of products out there. You want to find one that has your values.
right, absolutely.
And this is why the most important thing for folks right now is to make sure that we're not being driven by AI, right? That we're in charge, the humans stay in charge. So AI never makes the final decision on something like posting tweets, right? AI doesn't get to put up the drafts they've made for communications. AI is going to augment our work. AI is going to take away from us a lot of administrative work, which is going to be great, but we have to make sure that people from the outside can always reach a human on the inside, that humans on the inside are always the final decision makers, and that we keep AI as a tool, not as an automated system where we lose our humanity. This is just critically important to the next phase of work.
Right. Yeah.
So when we get AI doing what it does best, and right now those are rote tasks. For instance, Gung, you know that week leading up to a board meeting where the finance department is frantically trying to update the budget for the year, reconcile all the budget, get the financial reports going?
Yeah.
All of that work is going to be happening in real time automatically. We're not going to have to do any of that catch up work. All of your expense reports are going to be done, are going to be automated. You're going
Mm,
to be able to find information internally in a nanosecond, not searching around on the share drive, looking for a document. You're going to be able to schedule time with people in much easier ways. All of the 20 to 30% of our time right now we spend on mindless administrative tasks can be done by AI. When that happens, Gung, what we get, the real ROI for AI is time. That's what we get. Not efficiency, not going faster doing the same tasks. We free up a new chunk of time. And
mm,
then we get to decide how we want to use that time. And my greatest hope is that people will use that time to get to know other people
mm,
well, to become deeply human-centered, to go out and have coffee with people, to pick up the phone and call a low-dollar donor and say, how did we make you feel as a donor, right? How did we make you feel joyful? And did we make you feel like you mattered to us, or do you feel like an ATM machine? To problem solve, to build teams, to do all the human things that we never want technology to do instead of us. That to me is the greatest ROI of working using AI well. Does that make sense?
yeah, I think so. But yeah, I mean, and I should mention this, if you have questions for Allison throughout, please put those in chat. We'll try to monitor for that, and I'll voice that to Allison as I see them come in. So yeah, if anyone has anything to add, please do put that in chat.
This dividend of time is also so important, Gung, because we have an enormous burnout problem in the sector, right? our burnout rate is just incredible. It was just listed in a report from the Center for Effective Philanthropy as the #1 problem in the sector is people burning out quickly. The average tenure for development directors, 18 months. If we could have that time back, we could even give it to people and have a 4-day work week, right? We get to choose how we want to use that time to make our organizations both more human-centered and more resilient, right?
Yeah.
Being able to help people to stay longer.
I mean, in many ways, that's the founding premise for companies like Civic Champs as well, right? Which
Yeah,
is how do we give back time to people and get rid of all the pen and paper and the manual processes? And I think you're right. AI can play a role in even further providing more of that time back so that you can
that's right.
reinvest it. And none of those tasks, even the ones examples that you're talking about, are particularly fun, right? Is not the part of your job that you're super excited about. No one's thinking, let me go home and type into Excel all of these volunteer hours, right? That's what I want to
Right.
do with my day.
That's exactly right. And systems like yours can tell the story of volunteerism, right? Help us to manage those volunteers well, help us to create joyful and meaningful experiences for people, but mostly free up people to do
Mhm.
the work that they came to do, right? Nobody came to do Excel spreadsheets. People came to help other people. That's why we come to this work.
Yep, yep, yeah.
So the last chapter I mentioned a few minutes ago was social media, and we all jumped in and we started to do things, and everybody could see it at the same time, Gung, and we had, viral events like the Ice Bucket Challenge, and it was fun, and then the corporate overlords took it over, and that wasn't fun. But we all jumped in at about the same time. This time, it's important to step really carefully. I think of my friend calls AI hot sauce, not
Mm.
ketchup, right? A little bit is going to go a long way. But before you use it, you really have to think about exactly when and how are we going to have machines do the work that only people could do until right now, right? Back to our HR example. Only people were screening those resumes before. Now
Mm.
you're going to automate it. You're going to have machines do it. You're not going to see it at work. That's a really fundamental shift in the way that we do work. So before you jump in, you need to create an organizational, ethical, responsible, and responsible use policy to really think through when and how are we going to be using this very powerful, most powerful technology we've ever had in our hands. My colleague Beth Cantor has been writing a lot on this
Mm.
right now. You can look up her online. She's got all sorts of draft policies out there. But this is step #1, right? Really have to think through how we're going to make sure that AI is improving our work, not um, uh, decreasing our humanity, our human connections.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of some research one of our friends from Memory Fox. They do video aggregation collection as a platform, and one of the topics they've been talking about is ethical storytelling, right? And so,
Yes.
how do you tell these stories? How do you get permission? Do you need to ask permission again
Yes.
after every time? And I think one of the things that I think about with AI is, I mean, and in some ways you already see it with social, where once the information, the video, the image is released, there's no taking it back.
No, once it's
Right?
out, it's out.
And AI, maybe even worse in some ways, is you might not even know that it's
Yep,
been released. And
that's
now
right.
it's ingrained inside the brains of the of the machine where it can't unlearn the thing it already learned, right?
Yeah, I think all of that is spot on. I wrote an article for the Chronicle of Philanthropy about 2 weeks ago on this next phase. It's going to be very difficult to tell what's real from what's not real, right? What's information, what's misinformation, what images are real, what images are AI generated. And it's going to be really, really important that organizations are trustworthy to people, right? That we increase our trustworthiness. And the work of volunteer management is really central to that, because that is a place where organizations are connecting to people in communities. And if you have the highest level of trust, of basically love with these people, they're going to tell their friends, right? You're going to be able to create a whole network of ambassadors for your cause. That's just super important for this next phase of organizational life.
Yeah. Oh.
So speaking of volunteer management, the way to begin, once you do your ethical policy, Gung, then it's important to look for what I call an exquisite pain point in your organization, right? That's a bottleneck that's stopping other things from happening. The Trevor Project provides counselors to speak with LGBTQ plus teens who are struggling. They don't have trouble recruiting volunteers to do the counseling. What they have trouble doing was training the volunteers. They didn't have enough trainers. So they built a bot to do part of that training, not all of it, right? Eventually, the volunteers do interact with people, but to get people started, they built a chat bot for helping people to understand the work, get ready for the work, walk through the process of getting started, and it has helped them to increase the number of prepared counselors by 200%, the first year that they put it into practice. So that's the first step. Well, the second step after the ethical and responsible use policy is really looking at where are the bottlenecks in our system. It could be training volunteers. It could be recruiting volunteers. You could use a chatbot online to do that, right? To offer different opportunities. It could be using a system like yours to help people get ready to volunteer. It could be the outreach to nonprofits to figure out what the volunteer activities could be. So there's a whole bunch of different places where you could have a bottleneck, and that's where you begin, where that exquisite pain point is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is dangerous. It's giving me all these thoughts. I was like, oh yeah, we could do that. I'm sure my engineer is like, no, we have
wheels are turning.
Yep. And then the leaky bucket problem.
Okay, so I appreciate that folks here are coming with a volunteer management hat on, but I do want to talk about the leaky bucket problem because it is so central to why our organizations are so under-resourced, Gung, and that is creating just tremendous stress internally. Back to that 18-month tenure for development directors. So here's what's happening, and this is a 60-year-old problem, a problem that was created 60 years ago when direct mail marketing began, right? There were companies that gathered up millions of names in lists, and other companies that began to sell products through the mail, and that became direct mail fundraising. And the conventional wisdom that that model created, that eventually became email fundraising, was a spray and pray approach. We're going to take these large lists of people. We're going to send them all the same appeal, right? Whether it's selling a TV or asking for $25 for a cause. We're going to get a very low response rate. 2 to 3% is considered success in that model. But don't worry, Gung, those people that you got, those donors, are going to stay with you, and you're going to make up the money you lost on acquisition in the out years. But here's the reality. Almost none of those donors make it from year 1 to year 2. We don't take care of them. We don't greet them well. We don't thank them well. We don't engage them well. And they drop off almost as quickly as they come. That's the leaky bucket. And so you've now lost money on acquisition, you've lost money on retention, and once they're gone, you have a 4% chance of getting them back. This creates an annual panic to fill up that leaky bucket because your board is asking you, how much cash did you bring in last quarter? So you go quarter to quarter, trying to get cash in the door. You're not looking at retention. And it's a dreadful, expensive burnout kind of problem that has created just a dreadful culture within the sector.
And that's a great
So,
transaction. Oh, go ahead.
no, you were right to go right to that transactional versus relational. So what we're doing at every.org with funding from Fidelity and Gates is creating new models of relational fundraising at scale. When people hear relational fundraising going, they think, oh, you want me to take every $10 donor out to lunch? No, I want you to treat them well, right? And it begins by reframing the issue. So again, those boards are using the wrong measures, right? Boards are looking at cash in the door. I want boards to look at donor retention rates, right? And I want boards to think about questions like, how are we making donors feel? How do we get to that second and third gift from them? Because once you get to second and third gift, you're okay. They will stay with you for a while. How can you use AI to customize communications with donors? And the Rainforest Action Network customized the thank you note and the first communication, not an ask for donations to donors, and got an 800% increase in the number of monthly donors, just customizing those two communications to donors, right? People are lonely and they want connection badly. You all can read, from the left to the right here, but I think there's an opportunity to create a new chapter in low dollar fundraising and for every organization to have a base of support and move away from the leaky bucket. So I just thought that that was important to share with folks.
Yeah, no, and I think in many ways, right, volunteering, a couple weeks ago we talked about volunteering, sort of rebounding and being higher than even pre-COVID, which is
Right.
in stark contrast to the continuing decline in individual giving rates. And so, and we all know that volunteers are more likely to give, they have the highest affinity for giving. And so, we posited that potentially one way to rebuild that pipeline of small dollar donors, or this base that you're talking about, is potentially to engage our volunteers. I'd be curious, Allison, as we transition to more of a our fireside chat, if you will. What do you think about that idea? Do you agree with
Yeah.
it? Would you make tweaks to it?
Yeah. So I think that's spot on, Gung, and I encourage volunteer management folks to think less about tasks, right? We tend to think about, here are activities we want volunteers to do, and to think much more about relationship building, right? How can I get to know this volunteer better, understand why they came, what kinds of activities give them joy,
Yeah.
in order to, yes, keep them coming, but also, yes, turn them into ambassador for us, right? People have so much to give. They have time, they have experiences, they have knowledge, and we need to think about volunteers as whole human beings more.
Yeah. No, right. Exactly. You don't think of yourself as individually as like, oh, I'm a donor, or I'm a volunteer. Right.
That's exactly right. I'm a person. I love doing this because I'm passionate about this issue, but also I'm feeling well treated by this organization. That is so important to people, right?
Right.
And we can, again, do this at scale, aided by AI, to customize experiences and communications with people.
Oh, that's great. And I guess building on that, there was a question by Leslie Brenna from Lakeaway Area Habitat for Humanity. And she asked, we get lots of one-time volunteers. I like tips on recruiting dedicated, repeated volunteers. I don't know, in terms of, translating the leaky bucket. I mean, it sounds
Yes,
like kind of the same thing, except with the
yes.
volunteer. Are there lessons to be learned here on the volunteer side? And for Leslie, she's thinking about, should I just recruit quote unquote better volunteers, right? But
No, no. So the essence of this problem, and part of it is being under-resourced and having too much to do, which is just an endemic problem in the sector. If Leslie can create the time to be able to go out and speak to current and former volunteers, right? That's step number one, is to talk to people about the experience. What was it you were looking for? What did you get? What do you wish was different? How could this be more meaningful for you? That is the human-centered activity.
Yeah.
That's step one, right? It is to spend time talking to people. We spend way too much time looking at data and looking at survey results, Gung, and fooling ourselves that we have actually spoken to people. The qualitative data collection of spending a half an hour with you and finding out what your experience was like is worth 10,000 surveys, right? Because if you have this leaky bucket of volunteers, you're missing something, right? You're missing something about the nature of that volunteer activity and engagement, and the gap between the expectations of your volunteer. And it's unaligned right now, and you really want to realign that.
Right. And do you think, I think sometimes people hear that and it's like, oh, like I have so much to do, and now you want me to talk with all my
I
volunteers
know. How dare you
more.
want me to talk to my people?
Uh, but do you think, uh, my experience has been that, even like 5 conversations actually,
Exactly.
80% of the knowledge, of those insights, and it seems like you would agree with that, is that you don't actually have to have a ton of, it's not like every volunteer you have to talk.
Exactly. Exactly. Look, you could have 5 to 10 conversations and learn more than you've learned in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
What is important here, let me put it a different way. Just as important as what you do is what you don't do, right? We need to stop thinking busy is good and busy is effective. And we need to stop organizations thinking about efficiency measures. Efficiencies are nonsense when we're talking about people. Organizations tend to both grow sideways, right? Which is you add programs because somebody had an idea or somebody got funding for something. And then the activities that you're doing as part of those programs become baked in, and you never stop. You never take anything off the plate, right? For instance, I know a lot of communications folks who spend hours a month working on their newsletter that is read by 1% of the people it goes out to, but you have a newsletter, right?
Right.
My suggestion to folks is literally put everything you do on a table, look at it, and figure out, how do we take 10% off? And it will have no impact on your outcomes
Right.
whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
What are the most important things for us to do here? And I would add, creating a chunk of time to be in conversation with your volunteers is top of the list, because you're creating volunteer activities internally based on what you need done. And if you're not in conversation with people, with the volunteers who are expected to do it, you're going to create a mismatch.
Yeah. 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 I remember one of my professors said, that I remember distinctly, that you can either choose to be bad at certain things, or someone else is going to choose for you. And you'll never actually get to be good at anything if you don't choose what you want to be bad at. And I thought that was
Right.
so powerful, as a way to think about it. Um,
This
yeah.
is an endemic issue. I keynoted the National Philanthropy and Nonprofit Conference in Athens, Greece, 2 months ago. And I was stunned. They have a very young nonprofit sector there. It's only a couple of years old. And their nonprofits are trying to do too much with too little, which is exactly what we do here. So there's something endemic in doing this work where you want to make the world better, that you choose to do too much with too few resources. And unless and until we get that right-sized gun, right, either raising more money or not trying to do everything,
Mm.
not going to do it well, right? We're just going to be frantically busy, not effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you can go deeper perhaps and have more
Right.
impact. many ways. So, somebody asked Sierra Spicer Zimmerman from the Three Rivers Park District as, and I think you answered this already, but do hard copy mail pieces still serve as a viable engagement? No exceptions. Yeah,
You know why? It is because it pretends that people out there are waiting for your broadcast messages. Nobody's waiting to hear, chip in $5 or we did this activity last month. What they are waiting to hear is, we're trying to do these things. What do you think? How can we do it better? How can you help us solve this problem? People are dying to be engaged in meaningful conversations, right? We have a loneliness epidemic. Volunteers are an important part of helping to solve that problem. Your job as volunteer manager or communications person is about engagement. It is not about broadcasting messages to people.
No, that's yeah, no, that's I think I agree with that. And then maybe building, going along the track of different types of engagement. Stephanie from Friends of Lakeshore State Park said, asked, beyond web and mobile experiences, how can we best engage supporters, specifically for her within visitor centers and outdoor environments? But maybe starting with that, but then maybe making it more broad. Alice, I don't know if you have thoughts on beyond web and mobile. Yeah.
So I really want to encourage organizations to stop thinking that they have to have all the answers or all the approaches by themselves. Now, this requires undoing command and control cultures. And I know that not every organization is going to be there, Gung, right? If you're in a command and control culture, the ethos there, the expectation is that staff have answers and projects and opportunities for volunteers, and then we go out and we get people to do what we want done, right? In a network, in a much flatter environment where you're not needing to have that level of control, where you begin is in conversation with supporters and potential supporters of, these are our pain points. These are the kinds of things we're trying to solve for, or where we need help. What do you think? How would you like to be engaged, right? And creating a conversation where you're co-creating opportunities for people to help, right? Think of the difference of that. If you've co-created, now you're invested in this. And it's not going to be for everybody, but for 10 to 15% of people, boy, are they going to be supercharged to feel like, oh, somebody listened to me. I'm appreciated here, right? I get to build something here. And that's all you need. You need that core group of people who are super engaged and excited and ready to hit the ground running. And the way to get those people is to stop treating them like faceless ATM machines, right?
Yeah, I don't know how many organizations do that, but I could, especially perhaps to start more simply, right? Like you said, it doesn't have to be everyone.
No, try it with one activity, right? You have one place. I'm just going to make it up. Let's say it's a summer park cleanup activity, right? And this is important to your organization. It's a core of what you do. How about opening it up next spring and saying, this is the way that we've done it. We're struggling though. We're struggling to have enough volunteers. We're struggling to cover enough parks. Whatever the issue is, let's rethink this. Let's reimagine this, right? And open it up to people's creativity and goodwill. And try it as an experiment.
Yeah. See what happens. Maybe
See
you
what
get a
happens. You're going to learn something, right? And you're going to make a new friend. I guarantee you're going to make a new friend.
Yeah. I'm going to transition a little bit into more, let's say, tactical questions here. And so one of the ones that we two that we got. One was around what kinds of technology specifically can benefit the donors and volunteers. This is from Arnold King, Black Women in Blockchain. And then a related question I thought was, what are the best strategies for converting our volunteers into long-term individual donors? And that's from Vanessa from Habitat El Salvador.
So I'm not going to weigh in on specific technology tools, right? There are going to be a ton of them. Of course, we're going to start with Civic Champs, no question about that. I think rather than looking for a tool, I think you want to look for a partner, right? You want to look for a company that is values aligned with you, that isn't selling all your data to other people, that is, as we mentioned before, testing for bias, all of the things that we want in a good partner for you, because there are going to be lots and lots of options for tools and companies to work with. At the end of the day, Gung, the most important thing is using the right systems and the right tools to create human engagement, right?
Yeah.
That is the key that we're trying to solve for here. So whatever system you use, whatever process you use, it needs to be creating time and space for people to come together and get to know one another. And that's what you need to be measuring, right? When we were talking about boards measuring the wrong thing for fundraising, right? They have the wrong measures. They're looking at cash in the door right now. They're not looking at donor retention. In that same conversation, boards are so focused on outputs, right? The number of volunteer hours, the number of, things that were done, the kind of factory output, and not focused enough on how are we making people feel here. That to me is the key about being a great organization, internally, staff, and externally with volunteers, right? Do people feel appreciated and known? Or do they just feel like they're cogs in a great big machine?
Right. And that could be, potentially as a question to vet vendors or tools is, does this tool allow me to better engage and better build those connections? And, is it supportive of that, or actually does it, drive me actually towards a transactional model? Right.
Well, that's just it, right? If we want to get to that dividend of time, right, then we have to have the right systems and the right tools in place that are securing and appreciating the need to have time for people to get to know people. Right.
And then I think, I wanted to ask one more question before we kind of get into, opening it up for maybe the audience and doing a little bit of a wrap up. But, we had one question here in terms of, how can, this is from Leslie Kellogg from the Leland Conservancy, but she asks, how to increase the perceived value of volunteers and their contributions to the org. And I think you were kind of talking about this, which is, we were so focused on these outputs.
Yeah.
And I think what Leslie's hinting at is like, hey, I don't feel like our volunteers are truly being appreciated or valued. How can I, for my ED, for my board, help them see that value and get them to be more supportive of having a more human centered approach? What would you say to Leslie?
A few things. One, I would make sure that we are having volunteers do mission critical things with us, not busy work, right? Not that that person is doing that. And then it always comes back to measurement for me, Gung, because you only value the things that you measure,
Yep.
right? So if you want to value the contribution of volunteers, then you have to measure that, and you have to measure it holistically. So we know right now when people are looking at measuring volunteers, they're going to measure hours and tasks done and all of those quantitative things, right?
Yep.
But this conversation is highlighting the need to measure how connected volunteers feel to the organization, what they know now about this work that they didn't know before, whether and how they're prepared to go out and recruit other people, whether we've made a meaningful difference in their life, a whole set of really important human-centric measures that show the importance of doing this work, right? And can make the case then to the C-suite and to the board.
You do what you measure, right?
Exactly, right? That's what drives everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Don't get me started on boards, Gung. I'm not a fan. They don't know what they're doing and they're measuring the wrong things. But other than that, they're great.
They're great. Great. Well, I'm going to end on a little bit of a self-serving question. The Crystal Star from Habitat for Humanity of Ventura County asks, what ways can Civic Champ system help with the solutions you present in this webinar? And so that's a good segue for us. And so for those of you that don't know about Civic Champs, just real quickly, we're a volunteer management software platform. And so basically our goal is to really be there for every step of the sort of volunteer management lifecycle for you as a volunteer manager. So whether that's recruiting, onboarding, getting folks scheduled, engaging them, retaining these volunteers, and then reporting on these volunteers, right? So we want to have solutions that kind of cover each of these bases for you, give you back that dividend of time, as Allison mentioned. And so just real quickly, in 30 seconds, right, this is just some examples. This is our mobile app. We try to make it really easy for people to check in as an example into their, what they're here for, kind of streamline that process. We also have a kiosk. Admins can, of course, check in volunteers on their behalf as well. But one of the unique things that's, I think, more relevant for this conversation is whenever someone checks out for the day, we also collect feedback and reflections and also note if they were happy or not. And so to the point of you are what you track and measure, right? In this case, you're actually valuing that volunteer experience and whether they had a good time or not. And you have metrics in place that can tell you a little bit. And certainly you will know not to solicit potentially folks that gave you the frowny face as well, and potentially identify people that are more likely to give financially or more likely to bring friends the next time as well. So you can of course see all of this on Civic Champs in terms of our dashboard, right? So little smiley faces, the commentary, and so this is just a little bit of an example of what we do. Before we run out of time, I did want to make sure that we did share if folks wanted to stay in contact with Allison and myself, right? This is our contact information, email, our websites, and then our LinkedIn channels as well. And so please do reach out if you're looking to connect. And I think Ariana may be posting some of this in the chat as well, so to make it easy for folks. And we are looking for feedback. So we've been doing these webinars now. I think we're on our 50th or so webinar. Actually, I should count that. That would be a special one. I'm not sure we're quite at 50 yet. But we're doing these every other week now. So we have one coming up in 2 weeks for folks that are interested in joining us again. But we also want to know, how did you like this webinar? Did you find a lot of value in it? How can we be better? And so we'll take that into account as well. And then a couple things that Allison shared with us are these articles that she cited. So one of them is around increasing donations to giving platforms. You can see the article that she's written here. It actually talks about a really interesting study that they did around tips from donors and how that's how people think about tips. And then the second one is stop treating donors like ATMs. Here's a way to do that. Great article, highly recommended in terms of reading to further dive in on her perspectives on transactional versus relational fundraising. And of course, you can apply that to volunteers as well. And then finally, for us, of course, for webinar attendees, we are going to offer a 20% discount for anyone that's interested in booking a demo with us before September 1st. So feel free to grab a time with us. But with that, I see we have here in chat, Ariana is answering some of these questions, and then we have a couple questions from the audience. So we'll dive to that. So I think we have Steve asked, can you speak to how this human engagement focus applies to corporate giving and sponsorships?
That's an interesting question. I think that the same human-centric principles apply, Gung, no matter the organizational setting, right? If you're running corporate volunteer management program, right? You still need to be in conversation with people in your company about what they want to do, about how this can be meaningful for them. So I think all of those same principles apply. And then what's added for corporate folks is making sure that their engagements with nonprofits are meaningful to the nonprofits, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a two-faced platform of you've got to be in conversation with your volunteers, with your colleagues in your corporation, and you have to really be thinking in more qualitative ways with the nonprofits that you're engaging with as well, right?
Yeah, right. And there's so many team building, outreach, right? So it's like, I have 50 volunteers. We need to do something for 4 hours on a Wednesday morning. Can you
Exactly. Now,
support us?
okay, I get that all of that is driving your decision making, but how about let's make it meaningful as well, right? Meaningful for the
Right.
nonprofit, meaningful for the volunteers.
Would you like to paint our gym? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And if I was if I was a corporate volunteer officer, I would have a Slack channel where you're engaging current and potential volunteers about the things that they want to do and why they want to do them and how they want to engage, and just keep that conversation going.
And this would be for the nonprofit volunteer manager with the corporate lead, or are you thinking?
No, I'm thinking internally for the corporate, for
Ah,
the, right, if they're in charge of recruiting volunteers internally,
mm,
right? Don't just keep churning out ideas. Have your colleagues, your corporate
mm,
colleagues, creating the opportunities with you.
got it. That co-creation process.
Yes.
And then what about on the nonprofit side as a volunteer manager? Any tips there on how they can help their corporate partners with this co-creation process, or help them, you know, uh, build a stronger relation, other than,
Yeah.
you should, you know, engage that corporate partner in a meaningful way, but
Oh, so I think that's just right. Like you could even have your own Slack channel with that nonprofit on it, engaging in this conversation with your corporate folks, right? About here's what we're facing, here are the challenges that we have, and co-creating in that way as well. I can't tell you how often I hear Gung from nonprofits of a corporation brought in 50 people we didn't need, we didn't want, right?
they did give us a $5,000 check,
We
so we
got a
did it.
check out of it, right? Come on, we can do better than that.
All right. Well, I noticed, a couple of folks have some time constraints, and usually we try to give folks just a couple minutes back, because we know you might have a 2 p.m. meeting, so give you a bathroom break time here as well. But Allison, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been
My
a
pleasure.
great pleasure. We're going to send out the recording from today for everyone, but also appreciate everyone joining us today as well.
Thanks for having me, Gung.
All right. Thanks, everyone.